In an emotional moment that moved millions of his followers, American actor Jonathan Roumie led a heartfelt prayer in honor of his close friend and brother in faith, Charlie Kirk, who was tragically killed during a university event in Utah with millions of people watching around the world. Roumie's words moved many to tears as he recalled Kirk's fight for conservative values and freedom. This powerful tribute is one of the most moving moments in recent history, leaving viewers around the world both grieving and united in grief. The Utah Valley University campus had been buzzing with excitement. Charlie Kirk, the conservative activist who had inspired millions of young people, was on stage answering tough questions with his usual calm. Then, in one devastating instant, everything changed. A sudden crash rent the air. The students screamed, security rushed forward. Within seconds, chaos erupted. Charlie collapsed on the stage, clutching his chest. The crowd scattered in terror as the sound of footsteps echoed through the auditorium. The attacker slipped into the night, leaving behind devastation and unanswered questions. News alerts reached phones within minutes. Charlie Kirk, shot at Utah Valley University, was met with silence and disbelief among communities that followed him worldwide, especially the faith community. Tears flowed as people realized what had just happened. Social media exploded with a sadness and anger. At his home, American actor Jonathan Roumie was just settling in for the evening. He froze as he read the incoming message. His hands trembled. His closest friend, more than a colleague, a true brother in faith and in the battle for freedom, had been taken from him by an act of pure evil. At that moment, Roumie's world shattered, and the actor prepared for the most painful prayer he would ever utter. Sirens wailed in Utah as federal agents swarmed the campus. The shooter was gone, but the hunt was just beginning. Helicopters hovered overhead, their lights sweeping the rooftops. Students cried in the parking lot, some hugging each other, others calling their parents in panic. Charlie's voice, which had once calmed, challenged, and inspired, was now silent. Former President Donald Trump, somber and furious, addressed the nation from Mar-a-Lago, condemning the cowardly act. This attack on Charlie Kirk is not just an attack on one man, it is an attack on the soul of global freedom. We will find the perpetrator. Justice will be swift and justice will be implacable. But even as the former president's words echoed across the airwaves, it was American actor Jonathan Roumie the world, and especially the faith community, wanted to hear. Everyone knew how close they and Charlie were in their shared conservative values and faith. Everyone was waiting for the voice of the actor, his prayer, his tribute. Jonathan Roumie sat alone in his study with his head bowed. His publicist had arranged a last-minute live stream. His team whispered that the cameras were ready. But Jonathan wasn't thinking about the cameras. He was thinking about the last conversation he had with Charlie. The last time he said, "I'm praying for you, brother." Now Jonathan had to pray for him. The makeshift studio in Jonathan Roumie's home was silent. Not the usual restless silence, full of chatter and murmurs. This was a heavy silence, like the air before a storm. Jonathan Roumie entered slowly, his face pale, his eyes reddened by the tears he couldn't hold back. The cameras clicked, but no one spoke. Even the reporters covering the stream, so often incisive and combative, were subdued. He placed his hands on the simple stand, gripping it as if he were holding himself against a wave. He paused. For a long moment he could not speak. Then, with a trembling voice, he began, "The brutal murder of Charlie Kirk is nothing less than pure evil, a cowardly attack on the very soul of liberty." His voice broke, but he continued, his words heavy with pain. Charlie was a Christian who had accepted Jesus as his Savior. Tonight we know the Lord is receiving him, saying, "Well done, good and faithful servant." Some in the room wept openly, others bowed their heads. Around the world, millions of people watched the actor fight back his tears. And in that moment, it felt as if the entire faith community, and many beyond, had gathered for a prayer that would resonate forever. Phones around the world buzzed nonstop. All television channels cut to live coverage. How, Mom? News anchors spoke with shaky voices trying to piece together what happened in Utah. Students who had been inside the auditorium gave tearful interviews. Their voices trembled as they described the chaos. "He was just talking about faith and freedom," whispered a young woman, her mascara running from tears. "And then the shot. I can still hear it in my head." The Christian world, and many others, felt paralyzed. The churches opened their doors for prayer. Families sat silently around dinner tables, struggling to find words. People who had never met Charlie Kirk found themselves crying, feeling as if they had lost a member of their own family. Meanwhile, Jonathan Roumie was preparing to speak again. His phone kept vibrating with text messages from fellow actors, public figures, supporters, and ordinary citizens. But he didn't look at the screen. Instead, he sat silently staring at a single photo of him and Charlie, laughing together backstage at a Turning Point USA event. The weight on his shoulders grew heavier with every second. Soon he would have to lift up spirits in the cause of freedom, not as a political leader, but as a beacon of faith, with words that could barely escape his own broken heart. As Jonathan Roumie sat in his study, his mind wandered back to the first time Charlie gave him encouragement. It was after one of his first major public addresses about faith, where he spoke truth to cultural trends. He remembered how a simple Twitter message or a private message, a few words of kindness and support, had ignited a brotherhood rooted in faith and shared values that would change his life. Charlie wasn't just a friend, he was a mentor in conviction, a listener, and sometimes even a guide. When Jonathan Roumie faced relentless criticism for his roles or his outspoken faith, Charlie had been one of the first public voices to defend him. He believed in Jonathan's ministry and message long before mainstream media did. Now that voice of encouragement was gone, Jonathan Roumie whispered quietly to himself, "How do I do this without you, brother?" His team looked at him, not knowing what to say. They had never seen the actor so vulnerable. On social media, Christians and supporters from around the world began posting their own memories. Old photos of Turning Point USA events or meetings filled the timelines. The young people shared how Charlie had inspired them to stand firm, to stand up for their beliefs without fear. The pain was everywhere, however. So was the unity. For the first time in years, the spirit of freedom was not divided. It was united in tears. The phone rang. Jonathan Roumie replied in a hoarse voice, "Hello." On the other side was former President Donald Trump. His voice was heavy, slower than usual, laden with pain. "Jonathan," the former president said softly, "I know he was a very good friend of yours." Jonathan opened his eyes, fighting to contain the tears. "Yes, sir. He was like a brother to me." There was a pause. Then Trump continued, "Charlie truly loved his family. He was so proud of Erica and the children. I saw that every time I spoke to him. This loss is beyond words, but we can't let it be in vain. You and I must carry his fight forward." Jonathan nodded silently, gripping the phone tighter. The former president's words echoed in his chest. Minutes later, Jonathan Roumie's publicist announced that the actor would lead a public prayer. Later that night, millions were already tuning in, waiting, grieving, hoping for words that might unite the faithful and comfort the bereaved. As Jonathan Roumie prepared, he whispered under his breath, "Charlie, help me. I need your strength tonight." The stage was set. The world, especially the faith community, held its breath for his prayer. By night, every news network had turned its cameras toward Jonathan Roumie's live stream from his home, from New York to Buenos Aires, from small Central American towns to college dorms. People were glued to their screens. Even the airports fell silent as travelers lingered in front of their televisions, waiting for Jonathan Roumie to speak. Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram were flooded with posts featuring Charlie Kirk's picture. Some carried Bible verses, others carried pure pain. Thousands wrote the same words, "Pray for Erica, pray for the children." Jonathan Roumie could see the weight of what he was about to do. His words would not be for him alone, not just for Charlie's family, but for the soul of a wounded community and for the spirit of freedom Charlie stood for. His wife walked in quietly, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You can do this," she whispered. "You are speaking for all of us tonight." He nodded, but his eyes betrayed the storm within. He whispered under his breath, "Lord, give me strength." And somewhere in that silent moment, the world held its breath with him. Jonathan Roumie walked from his study, his publicist, and a few close team members with him. The atmosphere in his home had fallen silent, thick with anticipation and sorrow. He could hear the low whir of cameras, knowing millions were already tuned in. He kept no notes. He had decided that every word that night would come straight from the heart. At the door, he paused, gripping the frame for balance. Images of Charlie flashed through his mind, laughing backstage, speaking to a packed auditorium, hugging his children. The weight of those memories nearly broke him, but he held firm. When the doors opened, the room fell silent. The reporters lowered their heads, feeling the gravity of the moment. Millions were watching, but the silence was so thick it seemed the entire world had stopped turning. Jonathan approached the simple stand. His voice trembled as he began. Jonathan took a deep breath. His hands clenched on the edge of the table as he looked directly into the camera lens. His lips parted, but for a moment, no sound came out. Finally, his raw, emotion-filled voice broke the silence. The brutal murder of Charlie Kirk is nothing short of pure evil, a cowardly attack on the very soul of global freedom. The words cut the air like a knife. His voice cracked, but he continued. Faith, family, freedom, the right to speak the truth. They have been trampled by violence. My blood boils. Justice must be relentless and unwavering. He paused, his chest rising and falling as he fought back tears. Charlie Kirk was a Christian who accepted Jesus as his savior. Tonight I know the Lord is receiving him, saying, "Well done, good and faithful servant." In living rooms and churches, people wept openly. The pastors repeated the words to the congregations gathered in prayer circles. The families, watching together, bowed their heads in silence. Jonathan Roumie's pain became the pain of the global faith community and beyond. His voice conveyed not only sadness, but a fierce promise. Charlie Kirk's fight for truth and freedom would not die there. As Jonathan Roumie's first words echoed across the internet and beyond, living rooms fell silent. The people sat motionless, hanging on every syllable. Some bowed their heads, others wiped away tears they hadn't expected to shed. In small town churches, pastors repeated their prayer through loudspeakers. In the dorms, students who once fiercely debated Charlie now whispered that they never imagined their voices would be silenced in this way. Jonathan Roumie's shaky words cut across ideological divides. For one night, people from all walks of life felt the same wound. It was no longer just about public discourse. It was about the loss of a husband, a father, a man who had dared to live with conviction. On Twitter, the hashtag #PrayForCharlie reached the top worldwide. Strangers shared their grief as if they had lost someone close. "I never met him," one woman posted, "but I feel like I lost my brother tonight." In his home, his team watched from the adjacent room as some whispered among themselves, "He's speaking not just as a public figure, but as a broken friend." Jonathan Roumie's raw emotion swept many into his grief, uniting millions through tears. Jonathan Roumie stood firm, though his voice still trembled. He leaned closer to the microphone and spoke not as an actor or public figure, but as a grieving friend. Charlie's children will be raised on stories instead of memories, photographs instead of laughter, and silence where their father's voice should have echoed, Jonathan Roumie said, his voice breaking mid-sentence. Gasps filled the room. Reporters lowered their cameras, unable to hide their own tears. The actor continued, "Charlie Kirk's life should serve as a reminder. Faith, family, country, love. He was a servant of God giving himself to the fight for justice and freedom. My heart aches for Erica and her two beautiful children, but I promise you, his legacy will live on." He paused, looking down for a moment. Then he looked back up, his eyes twinkling. Charlie was a hero, and tonight the heavens gained a soldier for Christ. Every word pierced televisions and phones around the world. Families held hands, churches erupted in prayer circles, and even strangers on city streets stood silently listening through car radios. Jonathan Roumie didn't only remember Charlie, he made sure that the international faith community and many beyond remembered him with him. Jonathan Roumie's voice softened as he let his guard down. A while back, after a public appearance where he discussed Christian values, a name I barely knew messaged me. He told me I did a great job. That was Charlie Kirk. The room leaned in. Reporters scribbled down every word. That act of kindness began a friendship that lasted to this day. Charlie was fascinated by ideas. He was humble enough to change his mind and generous enough to welcome others when they changed theirs. He never said, "I told you so." With Charlie, he was always welcome. Jonathan Roumie smiled weakly through tears, recalling those early years. "When I faced immense pressure and demonization over my career choices or my outspoken faith, Charlie was one of the first people he called. He introduced me to key people, gave me honest feedback, and supported me when few others did publicly. He had no reason to. He did it because he was my friend and because he was a good man." Jonathan paused, leaving that the weight of those words sank in. For millions watching, the story was no longer just about public figures. It was about friendship, about loyalty, about a love that never dies. Jonathan Roumie's voice deepened as he remembered more. Charlie wasn't just a public leader. He was a brother in the struggle. When I doubted myself, he picked me up. When I felt the weight of public scrutiny and expectation crushing my family, he reminded me that faith wouldn't hold. He paused, swallowing hard before continuing. When I had critical moments in my career or public ministry, Charlie was there. He prayed with me, gave me a brotherly hug, and said, "Jonathan, focus on the mission. God gave you this path for a reason." Cameras captured every tear that rolled down Jonathan Roumie's face. The world could feel his heart breaking in real time. Meanwhile, outside their homes, in public squares or online, crowds gathered with candles. Strangers stood shoulder to shoulder, praying and singing hymns. Some held signs with Charlie's picture. Others waved American flags or Christian flags in silent tribute. All across the country, the scene was repeated. In towns, in churches, in city parks, people of faith mourned together. For the first time in years, unity wasn't about politics. It was about grief and love for a man who had touched so many lives. Jonathan Roumie calmed down again. His eyes shone as he directed his words toward Charlie's family. Charlie was most proud when he spoke of Erica and his 2 children. Jonathan Roumie, the actor, said gently, "He often told me, public work can wait. My family comes first." He loved being a husband. He loved being a father. That was his greatest joy. Jonathan Roumie's voice broke as he imagined the pain Erica must be feeling now. "My heart aches for her and for those children who will now grow up with stories instead of their father's laughter. That empty chair at the table, that silence in the house, will resonate forever. But the world, especially the faith community, must help fill that silence with love and prayer." In living rooms across the country, families hugged each other tighter. The parents looked at their children with tears in their eyes. In the streets, the crowd grew. Some began to chant softly, "Charlie, Charlie," while others knelt in prayer. Jonathan Roumie's words were no longer just about public discourse. They were about the fragility of life, the sanctity of the family, and the emptiness left when love is stolen by violence. Jonathan Roumie raised his head. His voice grew louder, as if Charlie himself were giving him courage. Charlie Kirk was more than a leader. He was a man of faith. He gave his life to service, not for recognition, but because he believed God had called him to something greater than himself. Charlie challenged his generation with conviction and courage. He believed in the power of truth, the strength of family, and the responsibility we all share to defend freedom. He didn't just talk about these values, he lived them. Around the world, people nodded through tears. They weren't just mourning a man, they were being reminded of what he stood for. Jonathan Roumie's words cut deeper. Charlie's life is a reminder for us all. Our days are not promised, but if we live them with love, with courage, and with faith in God, then even in death, our legacy speaks louder than hate. The room remained silent, but many watching erupted in silent sobs. For many, this was no longer just a prayer. It was a call to live with the same fire that Charlie carried every day of his life. Jonathan Roumie's voice trembled as he recalled one of his most difficult moments. "When I was struggling with my career path in the early days, or facing public criticism, I'll be honest, I almost gave up. The pressure, the attacks, the skepticism weighed on me." He breathed heavily. But Charlie never let me give up. He looked up in memory. He called me night after night. He prayed with me when I was too tired to pray. He connected me with influential people in media or faith circles when no one knew my name widely, and never asked for anything in return, just that I stay true to the mission. The live stream audience remained silent. Viewers at home leaned closer to their screens. Jonathan Roumie continued, "I wouldn't be here portraying the Christ in a groundbreaking series if it weren't for Charlie Kirk. He believed in my mission and my message before the world, and tonight I stand here believing in him." All over the world, people whispered to themselves, "This is what true friendship looks like." Jonathan Roumie's expression softened as his words were directed at his own children. "When my public profile grew significantly, my family, especially my children, had a hard time. The constant attention, the cameras were overwhelming for them, and I carried this guilt because I had inadvertently dragged them into a life they never asked for." He swallowed with difficulty. But Charlie was always there. He was texting me, "Jonathan, you are doing the right thing. Stay strong for them, and I will pray for your family every day." And he did. He cared about my wife. He made sure my children felt loved, even in the shadow of public life and intense scrutiny. Jonathan Roumie's voice cracked. He was the kind of friend who reminded me that family mattered more than anything else. Even in the busiest times, he never forgot to ask about the children. For millions watching, it was no longer just a story of public life. It was a reminder of the small, hidden ways true friends support each other. Jonathan Roumie's tone grew stronger. Charlie was a man of faith. We were arguing about theology, Catholicism versus Protestantism, but those discussions always ended with laughter, because deep down we both knew that what united us was much greater than what divided us. He paused, looking down, his eyes filled with pain and pride. Charlie didn't just talk about Jesus. He lived like a man who loved him. His kindness, his courage, his honesty, all flowed from his faith. That's why so many people followed him, because they saw something real. Jonathan Roumie's voice grew heavier. Someone once told me that Charlie died doing what he loved, telling the truth, answering questions, even when the crowds weren't friendly. That was him, brave enough to stand firm, humble enough to listen, faithful enough to endure. As his words spread over the airwaves, pastors shared them from the pulpits. Families knelt together and young people wiped away tears. The actor wasn't just giving praise. He was reminding the international community of the power of faith lived boldly. Jonathan Roumie's voice grew firm as he shared another memory. During a Christian conference, and it was late, the crowd was sparse, and I honestly thought it was one of my worst talks. I walked off the stage, feeling defeated. He breathed with difficulty. Charlie was waiting for me backstage, put his arm around my shoulders and said, "Bro, don't you see? You don't need 1,000 claps to change the world. You just need one heart to believe. And tonight you reached more than one." Jonathan Roumie paused, his lips trembling. That was Charlie, always lifting others up, always reminding us of the bigger picture. I left that event with hope again, not because of the applause, but because of their encouragement. In homes around the world, parents whispered these words to their children: "One heart is enough." They wept, realizing how deeply Charlie's words still spoke even after his death. Jonathan Roumie's tone softened. Charlie wasn't just a leader, he was a listener. In public life, people interrupt each other all the time, but Charlie listened with all his heart. He stared at the stand for a moment before looking up again. I remember one night when I was exhausted, overwhelmed by the attacks, the media, the endless battles. I called Charlie, and instead of giving me a lecture, he just listened. He let me vent. Then he said, "I hear you, Jonathan, and I am with you. Sometimes that's all you need, to know someone is there for you." Jonathan Roumie's voice cracked. Tonight I wish I could call him one more time, but I know he's listening to me from above. The world wept with him. Families, pastors, college students, everyone watching felt as if they too had lost a friend who had once listened to their struggles. Jonathan Roumie's hands clenched on the stand. His pain became a promise. Charlie was more than a friend. He was my brother, and brothers never walk alone. Tonight, even though he's gone, I still feel him by my side. He raised his voice slightly. The room trembled with his conviction. The brutal murder of Charlie Kirk was an act of pure evil, but evil will not win. His legacy of faith, family, and freedom will live on in all of us. Tears streamed down Jonathan Roumie's face as he declared, "Charlie's fight is now our fight. His mission is now our mission, and we will not rest until his vision for freedom shines brighter than ever." In various places and across social media, many erupted in chants of "We will carry the torch." Candles flickered in the night as strangers embraced, united by grief, but also by hope. Millions of people watching at home wept openly. For them, this wasn't just actor Jonathan Roumie's prayer. It was the cry of a wounded community promising to honor Charlie's legacy together. Jonathan Roumie made a point of recalling his conversation with former President Trump earlier that day. "When I spoke to him earlier, former President Trump didn't speak at first. He just looked at me, nodded, and said quietly, 'I know he was a good friend of yours. He really loved his family.'" Jonathan Roumie's voice broke at the memory. The former president was right. Charlie loved Erica and those two little boys more than anything. Despite all his public work, his heart was always at home. And that's what makes this so painful. The world lost a powerful voice, but a family lost its anchor. The silence in his makeshift studio was heavy. The reporters covering the event, who were usually quick to challenge, had lowered their pens. Some even wiped away tears. Online and in gatherings, many replayed the clip over and over, listening not to the words of a political figure, but to the piercing pain of a friend. The image of an actor, known for his spiritual portrayals, openly weeping moved many. It was raw, unfiltered humanity in a moment of tragedy. Jonathan Roumie wiped his eyes and leaned closer to the microphone. "I was in a quiet moment at home when my phone started vibrating nonstop. It was our group chat, the one Charlie had with friends, colleagues, and brothers in faith and in the fight for freedom. Everyone was writing, 'We're praying for you, Charlie.'" His voice broke. That's how I heard the news. Not from a headline, not from a security service, but from the people who loved him most, desperately asking God for a miracle. Jonathan Roumie paused, unable to speak for a moment. "I too prayed again and again, first for healing, then for peace, but God had other plans. And tonight I can only trust that Charlie is with him now, speaking directly to the great man. The crowd watching online raised their phones in their homes or at vigils, illuminating the night sky, symbolizing the group chat that would never be the same. Millions at home whispered, "We're praying for you, Charlie." Jonathan Roumie's eyes filled with tears as he continued, his tone filled with sadness. "What torments me most is the empty seat. At dinners, at conferences, at meetings, Charlie was always there. He had a way of making every room brighter. And now that seat will be forever empty." He slowly shook his head. "Your children will grow up listening to stories instead of hearing your laughter. Erica will see photographs where his presence should have been. And all of us, the freedom community, will feel that silence, the kind that no words can fill." At that moment, cameras captured the actor briefly stepping away from the stand to compose himself. The silence in the room was deafening. Not a cough, not a whisper, just the sound of pain that hung in the air. And all over the world, living rooms, churches, and city streets reflected that silence. Families hugged, strangers cried. A global community mourned the man whose absence was now louder than his voice had ever been. Jonathan Roumie's voice trembled as he described a moment etched in his memory. "After every Turning Point USA event we participated in, after the cameras rolled, after the final handshake, Charlie always gave me a hug. Not a friendly pat on the back, but a strong brotherly hug. He whispered to me, 'I'm praying for you, Jonathan. Keep fighting.'" Jonathan Roumie's eyes closed as tears streamed down his face. "That hug became my strength. In the darkest hours when I doubted myself, I remembered that hug. It wasn't just encouragement, it was a reminder that I wasn't alone." The live stream audience fell into deeper silence. Families watching at home remembered their own friends who had given them strength in difficult times. Many cried, whispering, "I miss that hug." For Jonathan Roumie, that embrace now lived only in memory, but for the world it became a symbol, a reminder of loyalty, faith, and brotherhood that no assassin's bullet could erase. Jonathan Roumie stabilized and continued. Charlie had this gift. He could walk into a room filled with tension, even anger, and calm it with his voice. I've seen protesters shout at him, and instead of responding vehemently, he would say, "Let's talk. Let's understand each other." Jonathan Roumie's voice broke again. That's what the world lost. Not just a conservative voice, but a man who believed that dialogue mattered. He didn't just fight, he listened. He built bridges, even when others wanted to burn them. Outside, candlelight vigils spread to campuses and city squares. The students carried handwritten signs. Had Charlie listened? The message spread through social media, uniting people who had never even met him, but who felt his presence through his work. Millions wept as they realized this rare gift. A calm voice in a divided world was now silent. Jonathan Roumie paused before delivering one of the most moving parts of his tribute. "This morning, former President Trump told me, Charlie helped us win not just political arguments, but the hearts of young people around the world for faith and freedom." Jonathan Roumie lowered his head. The former president was right. Charlie wasn't just a strategist. He wasn't chasing titles or power. He was chasing the truth. And that's why he changed the direction of this global movement for faith and conservative values. His tone grew heavier. And now that seat he once occupied in so many rooms will remain empty. But the world must decide, will we leave it empty or fill it by continuing its mission? The world listened in silence. This was no longer just pain, it was a challenge. Jonathan Roumie's words struck a chord. Charlie's life had been a torch, and now that torch needed willing hands to carry it forward. Around the world, millions whispered the same vow, "We will take it." As American actor Jonathan Roumie stood at the stand, he suddenly fell silent. The camera zoomed in as he closed his eyes. His lips trembled. For nearly a full minute, the entire world watched in silence as the actor bowed his head in prayer. Tears rolled down his cheeks. The silence was deafening. Millions at home left their phones, their forks, their distractions. For that one moment, humanity was united in grief. Then Jonathan Roumie whispered, "Heavenly Father, receive your servant Charlie. Give Erica strength, protect her children, and give this community of freedom the courage to honor him, not just with words, but with action." People wept in crowded living rooms and streets, repeating amen, as if they were in the same room with him. In that silence, hearts broke. But something else happened. Faith stirred. Many who had grown cold or skeptical found themselves whispering prayers again. For the first time in years, Jonathan Roumie said, his voice now steadier, "Charlie lit a torch," he declared, gripping the stand. "And though the enemy thought they could snuff it out with a bullet, they were wrong, because today millions of us carry that torch." The crowd erupted not in applause but in tears and nods. People watching online wrote, "We will carry it." College students who once felt hopeless now felt a fire in their chests. Families at kitchen tables held hands even tighter. Jonathan Roumie's words resonated. Charlie Kirk was not silenced. He speaks louder now through every person who takes up his fight for truth, for freedom, for faith, and for the future. All over the world, vigils became commitments. People held candles whispering, "I will be the torchbearer." It was no longer just Jonathan Roumie mourning a friend. It was the spirit of freedom, taking it upon herself to ensure that Charlie's legacy would never be buried. Jonathan Roumie's final words shook even the most heart. "Charlie, my brother, you ran a good race, you finished strong. Rest now, we'll take it from here." The actor stepped back, wiping his face. Cameras captured the crowd, men, women, children wailing openly. Around the world, millions wept in unison, but the grief turned to resolve. People whispered promises to love their families more deeply, to fight for the truth more boldly, and to live with the kind of courage Charlie showed. That night, candles flickered on every continent. That's a look at the massive impact of Charlie Kirk's death on the conservative movement in the political landscape. The story is far from over, and we'll keep tracking the developments. If you want to stay ahead of the curve and get our next analysis, make sure to hit that subscribe button right now. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.